I wandered for hundreds of years after I left the Hebrews in Africa. I found a cave in Arabia. I wanted to be here when the last prophet comes, the one that Nuh and Musa spoke of. I did not know when he was coming, but I knew this was the general area. I was in a place that would later be called Palestine. The cave I found here was high up on a mountain. It was peaceful and abandoned. I could tell some people once lived in it. I had no idea what had happened to them, but the cave was now mine. I bought furniture from a market and carried it here piece by piece. Elegant rugs were on the cave floor. I swept them often. I had no need for a kitchen or a bathroom, so the cave was essentially one big living area. I did not need to sleep, but I enjoyed it, and it was a good way to pass time. I built a bookshelf and filled it with hundreds of books that I have read. As Iblis used to do, I found myself sitting in my comfortable cushioned chair and staring into the fire. I had left the cozy cave many times to explore, but my patience and curiosity with humanity had seemed to sour. I frankly no longer cared about them as I once did. I saw them as foolish, spoiled brutes. They murder each other over the smallest things. They have no love or care for their fellow man. If they are not raping, they are warring. They oppress the poor and divide themselves up based upon foolish things like skin tone or eye color. More often than not, I found myself agreeing with Iblis. I found myself looking back to that faithful day when Iblis took his stand against Adam. I wondered if Iblis saw something back then in man that I did not see, if he was some oracle that could see the unworthiness in man. I could not understand why God loved man so much, why he preferred them over all his other creations, why he loved them more than me. Are we Jinn not good enough? Do we have some flaw? All I could remember was serving Allah. Every action I took was an act of worship. Why couldn't I get that same breath? I sighed as I stared in the fire, and I let these thoughts burn as the old wood did in my small fire pit. I decided to walk and go back out and explore. I had heard rumors of a Hebrew that was causing trouble. I, knowing the history of these cursed ebony people, was curious. I wrapped my black travel robes about me and walked from my cave. The cool night air felt good against my flesh. I sighed as I took several long breaths of fresh air. I looked down and saw a city in the distance. The torchlights that lit their streets flicked in the soft wind. I jumped down the mountain. I have learned some things over the years. I have embraced being a Jinn and explored many of my immortal powers. I could jump incredible distances. I could fall from space and land on the earth as if I only fell a foot. I could cover vast distances in a matter of moments. But of all my powers, there was nothing like just walking. I walked to this city. I enjoyed every step that I took. I savored the freedom in slowing down and taking in everything. If I have learned anything from mortals, it's to enjoy the life you have. For as they say, we only live once. My life was forever, but the meaning of it still resonated with me. I heard a commotion as I entered the city. "Whore!" a man shrieked. "Jezebel!" another yelled. Several thuds and the sound of a woman screaming in pain rang in the cool night air. I stopped trying to save mortals from each other long ago. I got tired of saving them from one tragedy only to be in another the next day. I was content in watching things unfold as they may now. I was no hero. I was a Jinn who was thrown from the gates of heaven and stuck in this dark pit called earth. I approached and joined a crowd of brown-skinned Arabs who watched men and women throw rocks at an ebony-skinned woman. I wondered if she was a Hebrew. She had the look about, the dark flesh and long curly thick black hair. She had many lumps on her face and body. Blood tricked down her forehead. "Filthy whores don't belong in our city," a woman shouted. She threw a rock at the woman's head. I heard a loud thud and the soft cracking of bone. The woman fell to the ground. For a moment, she did not move. The crowd rushed in to finish her off. They were shouting all kinds of obscene things at her. From the shadows, another dark-skinned Hebrew-looking man stepped. His face was kind and gentle. His eyes glowed with a fire that rivaled Musa's. He was a chosen of God. I wanted to run as soon as I saw him. I've had enough of prophets and the pain that came with them. But I could not take my eyes from him. The crowd hushed as he stepped in front of the woman. He knelt and touched her head. I'm not sure if the mortals saw it, but I did. A burst of white fire burst from his fingers and healed her head wound. The ebony man smiled at her. His smile was so warm, it could shame the very sun. He had his hair braided in several long-kneed braids that fell from his head. He brushed one of those braids from his eyes. "Why do you save this whore?" a man shouted angrily. The crowd started up again. They cursed at her and said obscene things at them both. "He saves her because she's a cursed Hebrew like him," a woman shouted. A rock was flying at the Hebrew man's face. Time seemed to slow for him. He reached out like he was picking a flower at his leisure and plucked the stone from the air. He glared at the crowd. The glare was not one of anger, but of disappointment. "If any of you are without sin, then by all means cast a stone," the Hebrew man said. His voice was calm, but radiated with a power and authority that could command the very wind. He threw the stone gently before the crowd. None went to pick it up. They stared at the Hebrew man for a moment, then left. They muttered to themselves, and they went about their way. I walked up to this man as he tended to the woman. "What was her crime?" I asked. The Hebrew man turned to me. He smiled as if he knew me. This man was a man of peace. For some strange reason, I loved him. I don't know why I loved him, for I did not know him. He was a stranger to me. But he commanded my heart. "A crime is being born a Hebrew and read," the man said. He knew of me. I was no longer surprised or shocked by this. It seemed all the prophets of God knew of me. I studied the woman a moment. She was beautiful and had the same glow about her as Safura did. Was she the wife of this prophet? If so, why did this man not defend his wife like Musa would have? Musa would have slaughtered them all. Only God could have halted Musa's wrath. "Beloved," the woman's voice rang. It was cracked with pain. The Hebrew man cradled her head and kissed her, where the rocks had hit her. I could see her sigh as if his kisses made her pain go away. "Who are you?" I asked the man. The man and the woman both smiled at me. I felt bashful suddenly. I had to turn my face from them. "I am Issa, and this is my wife, Arya," Issa said. I looked back at my cave and noticed the air started to chill. "Can I walk you to your home?" I asked. Issa smiled again at me. The calm smile of a father adoring the ignorance of his child. "My home is still far from me, for I am but a traveller wandering this life," Issa replied. I wondered if this was his way of saying he was homeless. "Come, Issa and Arya, share my fire and find rest in my home," I said, and beckoned them to follow. Issa grabbed the hand of his beautiful wife and followed. "We have no coin to pay for your kindness," Issa said. I did not turn back to respond. I kept walking past the gate and into the desert night. They followed me. "You can pay me with your story," I responded. Issa, the Hebrew, and his beautiful Hebrew wife sat by my fire. I wondered if the curse of the Hebrews affected him more than just being shunned. Did he know what his people had done? If he did know, did he care? I found it strange that Allah would choose a prophet from among the people that betrayed him. Maybe this was the mercy of Allah that foolish Gabriel was worried about when he kicked dirt in the Pharaoh's mouth. I watched as Issa stared lovingly at his wife. She would look away shyly, but I could tell she adored and cherished him just as much. They seemed oblivious to the world around them. They had found peace in the arms of one another. I was reluctant to disturb their peace, but I had to. My curiosity was maddening. "Do you know your people are cursed by God?" I asked Issa. This seemed to bother him slightly. A frown crossed his handsome ebony face. Arya stared into the fire as if she knew this was a tender spot for him. "I have been told the story of the great prophet Musa and the betrayal of the Hebrews," Issa said. He stared into the fire for a moment. This story seemed to pain him, and I did not know why. "I was there, you know. I walked with Musa through it all," I said. I was hoping to pique his interest. Instead, he sighed again. "I also know this. You are called Angrid, the companion of prophets. The jinns hate you, but the beloved of Allah love you. You are both a curse and a blessing. For when you appear, the greatest sorrows of our prophethood commence," Issa replied. He did not look me in the eyes. It was not because he was afraid. He was so kind-hearted that he did not want to offend me. His words stung, but his mannerism disarmed me. I have never thought about it in that way. Looking back, it was true. Every prophet whose life I stumbled into, horrible things happened. With Nuh, the flood came shortly after I met him drunk in that city of shit and dirt. It almost seemed like he was waiting for me. The same with Lut. He was already imprisoned, but the city was not destroyed until I was there to stand beside him. As I met Musa, he had just started to ask the Pharaoh to let his people go. I wondered what tragedy my presence would inflict on the kind, gently Hebrew man before me. Isa looked at me a moment. "What is paradise like, Angrid?" Isa asked. I cannot recount how many times a prophet has asked me this. I wondered if they knew paradise was their destination and they were afraid of the road they must travel to get there. Their suffering was always great. I cannot fault them for the road they must travel. Like all the other times I was asked this question, I did not know how to answer. "It is well worth your sacrifice, Prophet," I replied. Isa thought on this for a moment. His beautiful ebony face stared lost in the fire for a moment. I could see his chest heave as he sighed. "I owe you a story," Isa said. He never took his eyes from the fire. He stared like he saw something in the fire that everyone else could not. "My mother was a beautiful Hebrew woman named Miriam. Many would assume that because of the miracle of my birth, that I was a blessing to her. But the reality is I was a curse upon my beautiful beloved mother. My mother was a good, faithful woman. She prayed to Yahweh all the time. She wore her hair wrapped in a bun on the top of her beautiful head. Her eyes were the darkest black that one could imagine. She was tall, as was expected of our people. She, pious. Everyone in our small city loved and respected her. She was betrothed to a great Hebrew man named Yusuf. He was kind. He is my father. Not by blood, but he deserves all the love and praise of a father. For he was my strength. My mother was my heart. When my mother announced that she was pregnant, and she was unmarried, they cursed her. They threw rocks at her, just as you saw them to do Arya. They called her a whore and shamed her. My mother was outcasted and shunned from the city. She could not tell them that an angel Gabriel came to her and told her she would be a mother. She, being a virgin, untouched by any man. She could not tell them this child would be a Messiah, a prophet who'll try to lead the Hebrews out of being cursed. She was naive and thought her beloved people would accept her and know her character. My beloved mother was wrong to think religious people would understand the works of God. Isa paused a moment. When speaking of his mother, his tone seemed bitter and disappointed, not in his mother, but in how she was treated. This was a man who cherished his mother and the many sacrifices she made for God and for him. Yusuf came to my mother and saved her. In doing so, he saved me. He married her and told the people that he was the father. He took the shame on himself and cleansed her of it in the eyes of the people, even though it was a lie. His love for my mother would not allow him to see her punished or treated so. I have never been certain if he actually believed her, or if he was so in love with her that he did not care. I can remember everything. The sound of my mother rubbing her stomach, the songs she would sing to me, the way she would cry, her heart broken and soul burdened from the task she was given. Some say she was not a prophet, but to me she is. All prophets are used and suffer greatly for the sake of our Creator. We carry the burden so the rest of humanity can have mercy through us. My beloved mother, she carried me and suffered because of it. Our small, shunned and outcasted family was so poor that we lived in stables and camped in the woods. When I was born, my mother had to have me in stables that we were sleeping in. They were not marked out. They thought so little of my mother that she was forced to give birth in a dirty stable. I felt all the pains of being born. As soon as I could open my eyes, I looked at my mother and thanked her. I remember her weeping. Isa stopped and sighed. He wiped tears from his dark eyes. I did not want to interrupt his thought process at all, so I waited for him to continue. I was given gifts and hailed as the Messiah, and my life was already in danger. A king from a far-off kingdom heard a prophecy about me and sent his assassins to kill me. But the angel Gabriel came to my mother again and told us to flee and hide in Egypt amongst the dark-skinned Egyptians. We, being a Hebrew family, were darker than the average Egyptian, but still could pass as an Egyptian family. We spent many years in Egypt, hiding from the dark blades that sought me in the shadows. Isa stopped. He had been talking well into the night. As the sun was starting to rise, we heard a commotion in the city below the cave. There was screaming and yelling and the sound of troops marching in. Isa ran to the cave mouth and looked down. There was a long line of soldiers escorting a Hebrew man towards the city. "I have to see this and read. I will finish my story later," Isa said. I understood. The ways of the prophets were strange to me. I would not question him or try to detain him. He woke Arya, who had fallen asleep a long time ago. She stirred and groaned. Isa looked pained to wake her, like this was the best sleep she had gotten in a while. She wiped the sleep from her eyes and smiled lovingly at Isa. She stretched and hurriedly got up. This seemed like a routine to her, like she was used to hurriedly waking and fleeing. I wondered what they could be running from. I followed them out of the cave and down the mountain. I was also curious about these soldiers and who they were, marching through the city. We stood outside the gates and watched as a dark-skinned Hebrew man who looked a lot like Isa was being forced to carry a huge log that was tied and fastened on his shoulders. The log had to weigh much more than the man himself. He was badly beaten and whipped. He had a crown of thorns on his head. The thorns had pierced the flesh, and blood had trickled down and dried on his forehead. The man looked exhausted, like he was barely standing. "Here is the Messiah, the King of the Hebrews," a man shouted as they got closer to the city gates. "This man claims he is the Christ," another man shouted. People spit on him and mocked him. Isa stared at him. His heart seemed to be broken. It was later that I discovered that this was meant to be him. There was so much of his life of which I was not aware. I hoped he could continue telling me his story. To make it worse, it was the cursed Hebrews who once again betrayed a saviour sent to them as a mercy, as a way to end their curse. The Hebrew man locked eyes with Isa and smiled. "I suffer, so you don't have to, Master," the tortured Hebrew whispered. Isa wept. Silent tears of pain crept down his ebony cheeks. "I bear the pain for you," Isa whispered back. I could see a look of relief and peace on the chained and tortured Hebrew's face. Each time the whip cracked his back, Isa would wince in pain. I could see streaks of blood on Isa's back soak through his old robes. He was truly taking the pain from this man who was suffering on his behalf. I was confused by this. I held my many questions. We followed him through the city as people spit at him and cursed him. His face was beaten to a bloody pulp, but still the man smiled and looked up at the sky. "Father, I will be home soon," the Hebrew shouted to the sky. Isa limped and stumbled with the crowd. Blood covered his face and he spit out globs of it. I had to help him walk. I offered to carry him, but he shook his head. "That cross is mine to bear," Isa said. He leaned heavily on me. I could tell he was in tremendous pain. Arya stared at her husband helplessly. She openly wept for him and wiped blood from his eyes and face. They marched the man out of the city and to a hill where several other men were nailed to a cross several feet in the air. Their arms outstretched with thick nails through their palms, sealing them against the wood board beneath them. That board they were nailed to was in turn nailed to a long board that went from their shoulders down their spine and past their feet. There were 2 thick nails that nailed their hands to the board. Then they were hoisted in the air and left there to die and rot like this. They call this crucifixion. It was not a new practice. It was something mortals have been doing to each other for too many years to count. "Any last words, Messiah?" one of the Roman guards mocked. The Hebrew man smiled. He looked exhausted and bloody, but at peace. Several of his teeth were missing, and his mouth was bloody where they had been recently knocked out. He eyed everyone in the crowd. "I suffer for you, so you don't have to. My blood is spilled, so yours won't have to be. Please remember me, Lord," the Hebrew man said. He stared directly at Isa as he said these words. Isa forced a smile between his painful gasps. Isa looked just as bad as the Hebrew that was being murdered before us. The smile never left the tortured Hebrew's face. They laid him down on the boards and spread his arms wide. A guard stared at his smiling, bloody face and hesitated. He wondered what could make a man that was beaten and tortured and forced to walk with a heavy log tied to his shoulders smile so. A man that was going to be nailed to a board. The smile unnerved him. "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do," the tortured Hebrew said. The guard dropped the hammer and walked away. "I can't do this," the guard said. His superiors cursed him and shouted at his back as the soldier abandoned his post and left. Another soldier took his place and stared into the smiling Hebrew's eyes. He hesitated as well. "Do your fucking job, soldier!" his superior yelled. The soldier placed the nail in the palm of the tortured Hebrew. He brought the hammer up. "I'm sorry," the soldier said, and brought the hammer down hard on the nail. Blood splashed the soldier's face. The tortured Hebrew still smiled. "It's okay," the Hebrew said. The soldier wept and dropped the hammer. He also walked away. Isa spasmed in pain. He clutched my shoulder tightly and screamed into it. His whole body spasmed in pain and blood dripped from his palm. The officer cursed some more but picked up the hammer himself. "What is your name?" the officer asked. He made the same mistake as the others and looked into the smiling, bloody face of the Hebrew they were murdering. "I am Isa, the Messiah," the tortured Hebrew replied. The officer nodded and nailed the tortured Hebrew's palm to the board swiftly. He averted his eyes from the Hebrew's as he did his other hand and his feet. Isa could no longer stand. Blood dripped freely from his feet and hands. His body shuddered in pain. I thought he was going to die. Isa screamed as they roughly hoisted the boards the tortured Hebrew was nailed to. His dark eyes looked over the crowd and found Isa. The smile that had been on the tortured Hebrew's face this entire time faded as he saw the state Isa was in. "Give it back to me, Master. I do this for you. I suffer for you," the Hebrew cried out. Isa raised his head and forced a smile. "We will dine together in the gardens of paradise, brother," Isa whispered. I was shocked to see Iblis dressed as one of the soldiers. He locked eyes with me and smiled. He carried a sharp spear and walked up to the crucified Hebrew. "Long live the cursed Messiah," Iblis said. He stabbed the Hebrew hard in his side and pulled down hard, cutting him open. The crowd gasped in horror as his guts spilled out. Isa could not hide the scream of pain that erupted from him. Iblis turned to stare at Isa. He then looked back at the man he just murdered. He smiled. "Clever and read, but I'll make the world think this man is the true Messiah, and no one will ever know the true prophet's story." Iblis cursed me and vanished. Isa hobbled over to the man that died for him and kissed his bloody feet. I picked Isa up and carried him back to my cave. Arya brought some water from the town and boiled it. We tended to his wounds. I gave him water when he was thirsty. I ended up making several trips to the town to fill a bucket from the well. I did not have much coin. I had no need of it. I was able to get him clean robes and sheets. Isa and his wife stayed with me for months while Isa healed. "I owe you a story, Angrid. I promise, one day I will fulfill this debt to you," Isa said. He stood and limped to the cave mouth. He had a stick he used as a staff. He leaned heavily on it. Arya slung their meagre belongings over her shoulder. "You are leaving?" I asked. Isa frowned. He was sad to leave this cave. It was one of the few places of peace he had found. He considered this cave home. "I have a family to make. The bloodline of the prophets must continue. You will meet Muhammad not far from here. He is the best of us all. Tell him, Salamu alaikum for me," Isa said. He limped over to me and hugged me tightly. "I love you, Angrid. Know you are dear to me and all of the prophets," Isa said. Isa wept a moment in my arms. "I love you, Prophet Isa. I hope to hear more of your story," I replied. Isa smiled at me sadly and walked out of the cave with his beautiful Arya. I have never seen him again. He was always a mystery to me. I know now there are many tales spread by Iblis of him healing the sick and the blind, of Isa turning water into wine, or of him taking a fish and feeding hundreds with it. I have watched Iblis change the face of Isa the Hebrew over the years. He went from an ebony-skinned Hebrew with long braided hair to a pale-skinned man with blue eyes and blonde hair. But one thing Iblis could never change was the look of peace and power on Isa's face. I think Isa's purpose was to teach to a select group of disciples, and one of those was to be crucified in his stead. I don't know why Allah chose this path for Isa. I may never know. Maybe when I see Isa again and he fulfills his debt to me, I will understand. Until then, the life and purpose of Isa is and will continue to be a mystery to me and mortals. I miss Isa. I miss his sincerity and his love. I miss the peace that followed him everywhere he went. Though my time with him was brief, I loved him. I could not help but love him. He was the only prophet thus far that had not died in my arms. Something Isa said rang true in my heart. He had to continue the bloodline of the prophets. I wondered how many kids Isa had. If he did not have kids, there would not be a Muhammad. What would happen to that bloodline after Muhammad fades from this world? Would those that bear the bloodline suffer? Or would the blessing or curse of it vanish from that bloodline with Muhammad's death? Knowing the beautiful Isa left more questions than not. What was the purpose of this crucifixion? Was it another test for mortals? If so, how could they pass it if all they knew was the lies Iblis told about it? Could you blame mortals of the future for not knowing exactly what happened in the past? I hear some say that Isa died for the sins of mortals, but how can that be if he never truly died on that cross? Others call him the Son of God. I wondered how Iblis convinced them of that. Isa and the man crucified in his place were ebony-skinned Hebrews. They are all direct descendants of Adam. I guess all humanity could claim such. But there is a specific bloodline that was blessed. Cain was just as much a son of Adam as Abel, yet Abel was blessed and Cain cursed. All the prophets from Adam to Isa so far have been ebony to brown-skinned. I have no doubt Muhammad will be the same. They claim that God made mortals in his image. I was there when Adam was created, and this was never mentioned. If so, then that means God's skin is as dark as Adam's. Is this a reality that modern mortals can accept? The truly baffling thing to me is later on the descendants of Cain used the name of the ebony Hebrew Isa to enslave and torture the descendants of the cursed Hebrews that made their home in Africa after Musa. This begs the question, are the cursed Hebrews the descendants of that bloodline? They would have to be, right? Since two of the greatest prophets came from them. If Isa's words were true, and I don't see why they would not be, then the final prophet Muhammad of Arabia is of that line. But there were thousands of cursed Hebrews and millions who endured the second enslavement and are still oppressed. The deeper I delved, the more confused and tangled the knot got. I sat in my cave for many years pondering these things. I would go over every memory with the prophets and put them against this train of thought. I would come to a dead end after dead end. It was truly maddening. Honestly, I did not know why it meant so much to me to unravel it. I did not leave my cave much in the years after Isa left. I heard of another prophet called Yahya. He appeared a few years after Isa disappeared. Or maybe he was here around the same time, I don't remember. I did not seek him out. I have had enough of prophets by then. I was content in waiting for the final one. After this Muhammad of Arabia lives and dies, then what would be my purpose? If there are no more prophets, what would I do? I was growing tired of mortals and their pointless wars and hate of each other. I don't think I could tolerate many more generations among men. If there was no one to correct their dysfunction, the world would not last much longer anyway. I sat in my cave and thought of Iblis staring into the flames. I wondered if he was back in his cave doing what I am doing now. I did miss Iblis. I wished I could sit and talk to him and bounce my thoughts off of him. But I knew that was a foolish dream of a life long ago gone. I stayed in my cave and watched as the things I owned begin to wither and decay with time. I stayed there until I heard of a place called Mecca.